private property boundary. Eileen sent out statutory right-of-way packages to the property owners, and these were executed, I believe, as a blanket statutory right-of-way with a sketch in the package. Next slide, please. Again, project planning, how we selected the equipment was based off of just previous knowledge with the AMI technology and utilizing meters that worked well with the endpoint. And so we decided to go with what we currently use in other water systems. Next slide, please. This speaks to what we were just talking about for project planning. We can just skip to the next slide, please. So lessons learned from phase one with regard to project planning. Again, just defining when a statutory right-of-way is required. So if it's deep inside the property boundary, we then would approach the property owner and execute a blanket stat right-of-way. Again, we'll speak a little bit more to this. The Local Government Act and Community Charter sections that provide us entry to the private property. Of course, we had to really sort of establish a restoration standard moving forward, and then clarify the compensation framework for phase two. Next slide, please. So this is just an introductory to the next slide. Oh, I think we're missing a couple slides here. Oh, that's unfortunate. Did I in order?
The sample forms.
Okay. My apologies. I sent Emma, I asked her to do the presentation. I sent her one that didn't include the additional slides, but you will have them in your agenda package. So project planning, if you want to just pause there, I'll just speak to the two slides that I've added in here, project planning lessons learned. So meter pit placement on private property. This is something that Chris will speak to more with regard to bylaw amendments and the consent waiver forms that will be provided to the property owners. And you can see the two samples there. So you'll see the first slide outlines the document that is the waiver form the property owner would sign off on to have the meter pit placed. We're thinking just inside the property boundary. So this is not for those deep in the middle of the private property with the stat right of ways. I'm going over to the next slide. Which is the lessons learned. Again, Chris will speak more to this response to the consent waiver forms. And in detail there, it breaks out not very well, unfortunately, in this slide, but it does break out the responses we'll take once those consent waiver forms and letters have been sent to the property owners. And the decision-making process.
That's a good question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Slightly off topic, you can tell me to sideline it if you'd like. But as I'm seeing, I'm looking at the presentation in our package, and it's got the waiver and it's got the consent form. My curiosity is these are really good documents for governance for independent systems or non-RE owned systems. Are these good samples that we could send, let's say, to Fletcher Creek, who was working on waiver forms and trying to figure out how to do that?
Yeah. Through the chair, again, the purpose of the community practice too is to share that broader knowledge. Of course, it's just with the recipients of the grant funding through the provincial water meter grant. But yes, that's the intention. If we do find ourselves with lessons learned and a product in hand that enhances customer service and ease of water system operations and maintenance, we're going to share it. So for instance, we're in constant communication with Robson Raspberry Improvement District. They've also got a similar size grant to install water meter infrastructure. This is something that we share with them.
Okay.
So to follow up on this, if I may, through the chair, For most systems, metering is probably not what we recommend as their highest priority for small systems, right? We have seen that where they go after metering, but they typically have challenges with treatment or linear infrastructure that they're struggling with. That metering is secondary to their main issues, but we certainly can share.
So supplemental to that
Yep.
is definitely like the Fletcher Creek one is related to POV installment, and that's where they're looking for waivers. And so that's why, you know, this one, you know, word for word isn't the right one, but it gives them a template to work with to say, essentially, this is waiving certain risks around installing on private property. The one I'm looking at is a POV consideration on a household that improvement district needs to waive liability on.
And Tim will speak to this. I think we have, after his presentation, a little bit more discussion in that regard.
Sorry for the sideline, I just know
No,
like, oh,
good point.
that's
No,
a
no.
great document to be able to provide, so thank you. I'll at least send them the presentation.
Yeah, and I'm always available to.
Thanks, Chris.
Yes.
I'm gonna pause just for a moment because do have a speakers list. Now I saw Director Jackman and then Director Graham. So Director Jackman, go ahead, please.
Okay,
Yeah,
and
I
then
think the question on this one, I'll have a question. This is slide 12 of 22 on the right. It's got a little comment. Defer the installation. I have a question on another slide. I'll wait till later. If the installation is deferred to take some other legal process, then will your information package include public information that if the grant is expired, it will be full cost or different costs? When it says defer, that would be defer long enough potentially that we no longer have grant funding. Was that
Sure,
part of
sure,
the
yeah.
information package?
That's the intention, to gradually escalate again, try to work cooperatively with homeowners if it's a lack of clarity or understanding about what's actually, what work's actually gonna take place, clear up that. But again, we may reach a head wall where we just, move forward in agreement and get the access that we need. So we would, I think, defer that installation, inform the homeowner directly that, according to our bylaw, if it's not a grant funded installation, meter's still gotta go in. And here's the estimated cost of that meter going in. That meter will have to be, that meter cost will be borne by you.
So
Yeah,
supplement,
please.
I was looking then at what's the time frame for us to complete using the grant funding? We have another year, 2 years, or if there's, say, a lot of people who are not necessarily totally opposed but confused, could we be applying for an extension for, maybe 10 holdout properties to extend the eligibility of use of the grant funds? How much time have we got?
Through the chair, we've got until April 2027.
So another year.
So the intention is to, as Chris mentioned, we are just closing up the tender package number 3. There's 5 tender packages for the installation for phase 2. And construction for the first tender package will be starting within the next 2 weeks. The intent is to try and get this all wrapped up by, November at the latest of this year. So that should provide us with enough time for these outlier holdout properties to convince them. And if that doesn't happen, then the cost will be borne by the property owner.
Or request an extension if you see light at the end of the tunnel.
Through the chair, yeah, I mean, I would have to talk to the province about that. I think they're pretty firm in their timelines. That was pretty well laid out at the beginning of this project, so.
Okay. Director Graham.
Thank you. So I just have a question about the slide that says project planning lessons learned. And the question about clarify compensation framework. It says no compensation for a standard meter near property line, compensation only when required under the Local Government Act. Like, what does that mean? What kind of situation would trigger a compensation? How often does it happen? And how much does that cost? And who pays for it?
So I think Chris can speak to half of this. I will just say this, for the bulk of phase 1, the intent was to install them in the road right of way. So if it's on that side, it's on the public side, and it's near the property boundary, we would restore it to the best that we can to previous condition. And then, if it's inside that property boundary, that's where, we've outlined, additional compensation thresholds in the, consent and waiver form, and Chris can speak to that.
Yeah, through the chair, yeah, again, I've alluded to the fact the local government act requires compensation or restoration of any disturbed areas, during the work that a municipal government has undertaken. And that restoration is to generally, what it was existing. So, I mean, as I mentioned, it's gonna be for us for a meter pit installation, topsoil sod, and yeah, that or grass seed, and make it look like it did before. No ongoing encumbrance, no settling, around that meter pit. Should generally be an innocuous, spot, on the parcel. Specifically, if, we got into a situation, we're not looking to restore, somebody's retaining wall, a major structure, things like that. In those cases, we typically just work with the homeowner, and pick an alternate site for the installation of that meter to avoid that area that is non-restorable, so to speak.
Add just something through the chair. As part of the tender package, the onus is on the contractor to include pricing for basic restoration. So that is, as Chris mentioned, any sort of settling, they would have to come back and deal with that, grass seeding, simple fences, and asphalt or concrete repair. That site is on the contractor to repair and is part of their bid price.
Okay, good, thank you. Director Vandenberg, please go ahead.
He's gonna defer his to the end of the meeting.
Okay,
The
great,
end of the presentation.
end of the presentation. Thank you. Okay, go ahead, Alex.
Thank you, Chair. So we'll start here at the slide that's up on the screen. Permits. So this was part of our lessons learned. We had some back and forth with the ministry. Initially, they wanted us to place all of our meter pits on private land. We spoke with the province. We had a meeting with our provincial MOTT office here and others in the province. And they then decided to permit us to place the meter pits in the road right of way. There are some conditions on that. So this first slide is just outlining the responsibilities of municipalities and regional districts, improvement districts, for what MOTT is responsible for and what we would be responsible for restoration. The next slide, please. Our application included a standard detail and a list of properties. You can see those there. For the MOTT permit that would be issued as a blanket permit. Pardon me. Next slide, please. Some of the conditions there, I won't go through all of these, but in order for us to place those in the road right of way, these are the conditions that need to be met by the permit. Next slide, please.
Quick question.
Go ahead.
I assume this is all being mapped in GIS as well in terms of infrastructure. Is that an automatic thing?
Through the chair, so yes, part of this permit is that if it is in the road right of way, we will have to go after the fact, after the installation and do a quick, survey, like a GIS survey, and provide that information to Ministry of Transportation.
And then supplemental to that, or be also noting infrastructure on private property through GIS, or is that
Not, that won't be part of it.
Okay.
Yeah, they're simply interested in us maintaining that distance from the road prism and ditches, etc. So that's, and if there's any, if for some reason we're not able to maintain those setbacks, then they'll have a representative come on site and have a look at it, so.
Okay, thank you.
But we still recorded in our GIS system. The location of any significant infrastructure through service cards or through GIS.
Oh, absolutely, through service cards, yeah, we have a very detailed record of pre-installation, installation, and of course, all the meter and endpoint information as well for each one of the properties, yeah.
Director Popoff?
Yeah, just a question through the chair is, for all these bits that are put on Department of Highways right away. Obviously, you're gonna get permits from them and they're all gonna be identified where they are in case there are other utilities are gonna go in that area.
Through the chair, so this is a blanket permit. And we have to meet general conditions, so setbacks out of the road prism and so on and so forth. And in the end, once all the meter pits have been installed, we'll provide GPS coordinates to MOTT so that they have a record of that infrastructure that's in their right of way on their lands. Generally, it's on the contractor to confirm that there's no other utilities. So the BC one calls is the responsibility of the contractor.
Thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, correct slide, yes. So again, our lessons learned, essentially, we just spoke about what is required. We do have some ongoing issues with MOTT for phase 2, but I do believe that with the additional LiDAR imagery that we're providing to them and the drone mapping that we're doing, we've satisfied that for our blanket permit for phase 2. Next slide, please. The tendering, so for phase 1, we approached it in a way that essentially the contractor was responsible for costs within 2 meters of the site of the meter pit install, and then anything additional would be force account. So that was a bit challenging for our project managers because they had to do a lot of follow-up with the contractor and a lot of review of invoices, making sure that force account work was required and was reasonable. Next slide, please. For this, these next tender packages, we're placing more of the responsibility on the contractor. So having them include more pricing for more restoration processes. And there still will be some force account work, but it'll be far less than the original phase 1 tender package, which should reduce staff time significantly. Next slide, please. So again, with construction, a lot of detail on the pre-installation site photos, just a lot of record keeping, which we will maintain throughout phase 2. A bit more responsibility will be placed on the contractor, but again, we've got a full-time project manager that will be on site to complete a bit more of this record keeping, and then just be the person communicating between operations and the contractor for things such as main shutdowns and other public notifications. Next slide, please.
I just, is it our staff that is the overseer of the contract on site, or do we hire a separate site supervisor, separate from the contractor?
So for phase 1, it was essentially our staff.
Okay,
And for phase 1, it really did consume a lot of the time. That's why for phase 2, we did post a position for an on-site supervisor. Yeah.
okay.
And I think this will be a lot more seamless, having somebody on site. We're just speaking with the province to see what we're permitted to do with that, if we're able to have staff as part of that position, but I will follow up.
Interesting.
Still.
And ex-engineer director Chapman.
Actually retired status.
Retired.
That's what I meant. That are gonna do all that paperwork in June. Yeah, I was gonna wait till slide 21, but you did mention,
Sure.
clerk of the works or position. So in the next report section, we talk about this is fully grant funded. So the questions are on two sides. This clerk of the works or full-time position that should be funded through the grant, I would think. And are you gonna go back and try and get some of our other maintenance staff time recovered through the grant? Work they don't do on the ongoing, say, the membrane repairs at Arrow Creek and all the other stuff they have to do, or running up the Sanka, that cost us money later. And putting off normal maintenance work to do this project always has a cost. Trying to recover cost under the grant that's in the next report, fully grant funded. And our citizens are always paying attention to this now, because all too often we say, oh, let's get a grant, it's free, and it is never free.
Through the chair, I'll answer. So as I understand, there's two questions here. So yes, phase two, which is fully grant funded through the provincial metering pilot project, does provide funds for site inspectors, this type of thing. So for phase two, yes, and this will be funded. Again, I have a question up to the province, so I can't speak wholly to it. So there is a one outstanding question, but yes, they do provide funds for that position. Phase fund was not a part of this grant funding. So phase one was not part of this grant funding. It was through other senior government grants and some reserves. So, again, this was lessons learned. There was some time taken. However, phase one was also a lot to do with the infrastructure challenges that are in areas, not necessarily the metering, but because we do have lines being serviced, one property through another private property. We have old infrastructure in the ground that needs to be replaced and or repaired. There's, a lack of corp stops anywhere. So, shutdowns of maintenance, so the bulk of that phase one work that consumed operators was stuff that would have been required anyhow, really to either bring the system more in line with our bylaws, where we can't service one private property through another, or to make it operationally more friendly with curb stops and like being able to replace those curb stops that are aging and then falling apart. So yeah.
Fair enough. So it's business as usual for the most part.
But lesson learned. Great, thanks.
Next slide, please. I'm just sort of repeating myself here, but those are the lessons learned from constructions, primarily putting a little bit more onus on the contractor to include in his pricing the restoration work, and then hiring a full-time on-site inspector. Next slide, please. And just it's not on this slide, but just to reiterate that 132,000 liters per day, plus another leak that was just discovered, has been resolved as a result of this phase two metering.
Great, any further questions? Thanks.
You had Vandenberg that wanted to hand a presentation.
Oh, okay, yeah, go ahead, thank you. Director Vandenberg, please go ahead.
Great, thank you, and thank you, Alex, for this information. Two questions, the easy one first. Slide 13, you're talking about permits. And I understand now it's a blanket permit from the province for the road right away. Does it also require that on private land, permitting is required as well? Or does that permitting requirement get waived if it's on private land, is my first question.
Through the chair, so sorry, Director Vandenberg, are you asking if the Ministry of Transport is requiring a permit for us to install the meter pit on private land?
Correct, and more so for the owner to understand what their obligations are. On that slide, it's quite complex to try to figure out what you're saying. So I'm just qualifying it by asking, is no permit required when the device is installed on private land?
Through the chair, correct. There is no permit required if the meter pit is installed no permit required through MOTT if the permit is, or the pit is installed on private land. And that is why initially they wanted us to install all the infrastructure on private land, not in the road right of way, not in the utility corridor.
Thank you for that clarity. Second question, Mr. Through the chair, if I may.
Yep.
Going to slide 3, I'm back to the beginning. The alternate water supply study was of high interest for us in our area. Where I'm wondering, is there still opportunities being explored from the results of that study? Or is it just being shelved?
Yeah, through the chair, I don't like any study to end up as a shelf elf. You shouldn't just put that study up on the shelf. So yes, we are exploring grant funding to further that study. We've had feedback from members of Water Services Committee on what they'd like to see is the scope of that study, a deeper delve into some of the cost benefit analysis and the scope and the economics associated with providing another water supply dedicated to agriculture. And we've been in recent discussion with provincial partners looking for those grant opportunities.
Oh, thank you. And so I would assume in the future, we're going to get an update as to where this path is going?
To the chair, yes. As we hopefully we will have some grant funding opportunities. It's on the work plan to engage with our contacts at the province, and I do plan to come back to Water Services Committee with an update for you.
If I
Yes,
may-
but the grant funding is an important piece, but prior to that is the plan. And so with all the moving parts, what will you settle in on as a plan moving forward? That's the part that's of interest to me in our area.
Yeah, through the chair, I think what we've got in hand is a reasonable, conceptual understanding of what would be required from a sizing and alignment perspective for that alternate supply. Again, what we think we really need is more insight into again the economic side of things, the cost benefit side of things. So I think we're happy with the product that we've got, again, from that very high level concept design portion of it, but we do want more information to feed into the true feasibility of this and possibly delve into the phasing of any projects. We had cast a very large net geographically, so to speak, and that of course ended up with a big price tag for any potential infrastructure. But I think we're better dialing into where the needs lie within the Creston Valley, and we'll be able to better carve off portions of that overall project to look at area specific servicing strategies and cost benefit.
If I may add to this, so planning for this project is very difficult for us as staff. There is no funding sources that we have, right? We have nothing internally that can fund that project, other than dedicating some limited staff time to it. It all hinges around grants, and as we know in the current economic situations, grants are probably not easy to come at. And will always compete with other projects, as we saw with our last round of grant applications that we did for various projects for the terms. So very difficult what our next steps should be, what are we planning when we don't know what our funding horizon is. Yes, we can assume a certain grant amount and a certain project size. The last report did outline some staging or suggested staging to this project, but we are a little bit stuck what we as staff can do without having any source of funding to proceed with anything.
Thank you.
You've got Tierney on the list.
Thanks. Okay, so never mind. Yeah, Director Tierney, go ahead, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just want to say thank you very much to the staff. You've done an amazing job going back to 2024, putting $750,000 of reserve funds to leverage $3.5 million for metering. And it's paying back in spades now, finding those major leaks to a system which is absolutely stressed out for volume of water. Not to mention the how this looks in our standing for applying for further grants when it comes to other work that needs to be done in the system. You've really managed this well. Thank you very much.
If I may
Yeah,
add to
go ahead.
this, even the original $750,000 was actually grant money. It came from Community Works. So the project is almost entirely phase 1 and 2, almost entirely funded through grants.
Great, thanks. Director Popoff.
Yeah, just a question here. I'm looking at the chart of maximum operating pressures. Do we have pressure regulators installed also on there to regulate the pressure to each individual household?
Through the chair, that in our bylaw, that is the responsibility of the property owner.
But if I may, but we do have in larger systems pressure zones that keep the pressure within a range of acceptable pressures.
That's in the chart. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Just looking at the clock and asking Chris, regarding 4.3, what's your time frame on the presentation? The old 4.1. So Erickson Water System Universal Metering Project, which we've just gone
Through the
through.
chair, I mean, I can certainly present that pretty quickly.
Great, do it. I'm just trying to get the timing going here, folks, so yeah, go ahead, Chris, please, old 4.3.
Sure. Yeah, through the chair, this report presents information on staff's approach to rolling out the universal metering project within Erickson, and presents some challenges and opportunities associated with that work. As many of the members are well aware, we are dealing with, for the most part, narrow right-of-ways within Erickson, legacy infrastructure that's on private property, or portions of it are on private property. And these both present challenges to installing water meter pits in the preferred location, which is on the public side of the property line. We have learned a little more about the, I guess, requirements for engaging with property owners and working near private properties, and operating, maintaining, and installing water meter pits just over the private property line. So what this report does is kind of presents that challenge to you and our approach to it.
Great, any questions on Erickson? It seems like it's been a full Erickson day. We love them, don't get me wrong. Not anything other than that. Okay, well then, I see no further Erickson questions, so we'll move on then, Chris, if we could, to item 4.4, X 4.4, and we do have resolution moving first, second, and third reading. So if someone would be so kind as to move that. It's been moved, it's seconded. And you've all had a chance to speak to staff in regard to the particular water system that resides in your electoral area. So the chair is making an assumption that we've dealt with all the questions. So I'll briefly open for any questions on it. And if not, we'll call the questions. So I'll just pause for a moment. Seeing no questions, well done everyone on preparing for this. All those in favor of first, second, and third reading? Any opposition? seeing none, we'll now go to adoption. Can I have someone
Do you
move?
have Weatherhead with her hand up? Sorry, it just came up. Oh, no.
No.
Oh, your hand went up on the screen. You've got a hand up.
Okay, so
Right.
thank you, thanks, Chair. So now adoption, we've got it moved and seconded in here. There's no discussion on adoption. All those in favor? And opposed, no opposition. So that's water bylaw, that was that one. And then we go to item 4.5. Chris, go ahead, please.
Yeah, through the chair, staff have updated what we refer to as the water regulatory bylaw. So what staff have done, we've reviewed the bylaw, for, I guess, opportunities for either clarifying language in the bylaw, or including new language in the bylaw based on, lessons learned and information gathered. I guess maybe, I'll highlight some of the major, modifications to the bylaw. The definition of a meter pit was never included in the bylaw. We've included that definition in the bylaw. More kind of general housekeeping items. In certain cases, we refer to provincial legislation or provincial wording. That kind of boxes us in. I guess provincial reference to things like drought classification seems to change quite regularly. So we've generalized the wording around that. The major changes and updates to the bylaw really relate to the section 14, I believe it's 14.1, regarding metering. And we've certainly heard a lot of information about the challenges and opportunities with the ongoing metering project in Erickson. So the wording in the bylaw clarifies our approach and our understanding of municipal authority under both the Local Government Act and the Community Charter with reference to working near or on our property and maintaining our infrastructure. And again, kind of clarifies that approach. Moving forward, I think it provides clarity to homeowners. It's always nice to include this stuff in the bylaws. You've got a clear point of reference if you do have misunderstanding or you need to provide clarity to water users. If there's any questions on the bylaw or suggestions, here to answer those.
All right, so we'll open the floor to questions on this. Go ahead, Director Papa.
Yeah, just a comment, no real question.
Yes, go
I
ahead.
really like the red line version. Because that indicates to us directors what are the changes to the existing bylaw. Really appreciate, thank you for doing that.
Don't have to read the whole document. Me too.
We got that right.
I try not to hide anything.
No, that's brilliant. Yes, thank you. All right, so thanks for that, Chris. So could we have
You have Vandenberg.
Director Vandenberg, please go ahead.
Thank you. Just a curiosity question more than anything on the bylaw, and that is to specifically number 8, I think it's page 16. The new water mains will have a minimum pressure rating of 200 PSI, unless other no. So 200 PSI strikes me as being quite high. I know that if you had 200 PSI running into your house because you didn't step it down, you're going to be popping all sorts of fixtures, that sort of thing. Can you describe to me the logic behind that, if you would, please? And I guess maybe it is if you don't have a pressure reducer, you're in big trouble, sort of thing. I'm not sure. But the logic behind 200 PSI, which seems to be quite high.
Go ahead.
Through the chair, let me just find that reference.
What number is it?
Yeah,
Number
8. 12, sorry, it would be 12.
Maybe
This is unchanged actually from the existing bylaw.
Yes, I start with this. 200 PSI doesn't mean we expect or have 200 PSI in that line. But the line needs to be, need to have a safety factor in there. So if somebody accidentally slams a hydrant closed, you get water hammers, what we call water hammers. You exceed these pressures by far that you normally have in your system. And that's what the, generally in the industry, the pipe needs to be laid out for.
Thank you. I think we'll consider that the answer. It's pretty, Director, yeah. Is that okay, Director Vandenberg?
Yes, it helps me understand that that's
Extraordinary
not,
events, then it needs to have the requirement to handle extraordinary event. Go ahead, Director Popoff.
Yeah, so that kind of begs for another question. And through the chair is, we have our pit and then we have the service line to the house. And the pressure reducer generally is inside the house. So do we have any specifications of pipe to the owner that they have from the pit into the house to meet the 200 PSI if ever that happens?
Through the chair.
Yeah.
The plumbing code addresses requirements for pipe over that property, on private property, and contains provisions and material standards that are required there.
Thank you.
And in fact, outside of the construction permit, we have no right to regulate that.
Thank you. All right, so can I please have have a reading of the motion for second and third readings? It's moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. And then we'll move to the adoption. It's moved and seconded in the room here. No discussion on adoption. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. So thank you very much, everyone. We are going to go to public time now, then break, and then our delegation. Thanks, Tim, for hanging in. So public, is there any public time? Questions? We'll pause. Seeing none, the observer is observing, so that's great. FYI, when we come back, after our break and have the delegation, we are going to record this portion of the meeting, do a Zoom recording. It could be valuable to water user people. I had invited one person, our manager, he couldn't make it. But there may be some interesting things for water users as well, so we're going to record it. So without further ado, we're going to take a full 12.5 minute break. Back at 35 after, okay? All right, so we'll mute now and see you in a few minutes. Thank you.
Enjoy the
Good afternoon, no, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We have, approaching the reconvening of the meeting. And, we're about to begin go to item number 3, our delegation. And, I'll just give people a chance to make sure they're got their microphones going and everyone online is resettled in. Well, we reordered the agenda to have, allow the opportunity to have an open discussion with our delegation. Staff and myself met with Tim yesterday and talked about today and learned from Tim. And so
Recording in progress.
we are going to record this because this portion may turn out to be of value for people that manage private systems within our areas. And there may be pieces of this that we could direct water system management people to, just to get some more information to help them with their governance model. So rather than me overly introduce Tim Lambert from Wildgrass, and Timothy, by the way, for those of you that probably don't know, is a type of wild-grass. So thus the cleverness of the name, of which I learned yesterday. So Tim, why don't you introduce yourself, maybe a little bit of your, don't go short on your background. I think it's very helpful for all of us to know the various and sundry things that you've been involved with in regard to health in general and water health in specific, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure.
And then we'll just go into the presentation. So please go ahead, Tim.
So thanks very much for making the time and having me here. I'm very grateful to be able to talk about this work. And the presentation is based on some work I did with Nisukin Improvement District, which is just north of Nelson on the lake. And I'm laying out what was done there. In terms of my background, have a broad background. I've got a biochemistry degree and then had an epiphany that it's actually all about water. So I did a number of courses in engineering and a master's in environmental science and engineering, studying small water systems. And after working with engineers for a few years, had an epiphany that it's not about engineering, and did my PhD studying public health, but from an ethics perspective, and thinking about how we do things and all around consensus and building knowledge and talking and doing that. And so subsequently after that work, I worked in Alberta for 10 years as a manager of health risk assessment for the health authority there. And then I moved to BC and was executive director of health protection for the province of BC for about 13 years. And so was heavily involved with the drinking water system, was responsible for the Public Health Act, the Drinking Water Protection Act, and a number of other things. And so I've met with RDCK several times at UBCM and had many other spirited conversations with many directors over the years. And subsequently now I'm doing Wildgrass. And so this project came out of some work with Nisukin, and they had some serious water system issues and governance challenges resulting in their board collapsing and people resigning in the community there. And so this work is a result of a grant from Municipal Affairs and through our RDCK to do some work with them on their governance model. And so that's what this work presents. And some of this presentation provides the result of that. The framing for that work and how I approached it, and you'll see the first slide is called, it's one water system risk management plan. And so this is a title of some work that we did at the BC Ministry of Health over about 10 years to create one water system risk management planning, which is now a guideline on the engineering GeoBC website. And so, and I spoke in the past with RDCK about that when we were building that plan. It's mainly focused on large systems, but also was meant to also support small systems as well. And so the same kind of thinking was what was brought to the, how to approach this issue with Nisukin. And so just at a high level, the first slide, as you know, what is the one water system risk management plan? And the whole notion is to think about water from the watershed to tap and the sink to the watershed. So holistic way of thinking about it. And the whole idea is to, you know, incrementally manage your risk and think about how to do that and what are your priorities? How do you move that and gradually reduce your system risk and recognizing that it's all integrated. And so a key thing to think about small systems is a lot of them are also on septic. And so you've got, you know, you have this decentralized concept going on in the community, and it's important to think about that because there's some key advantages to that. And like, so for example, one of the key problems with drinking water is human waste and the communities are all together, their septic systems are potentially influencing the water. So point of entry has a really key advantage over central treatment because it treats it at the house. If there's any infiltration into the water line or anything, you're treating the water at your house and you're protected. With central treatment, you don't have that advantage. There's a way to manage your watershed. There's no oversight on the on-site treatment anymore, and that was an issue that people wanted to do a number of years ago. Just provide a way to think about how to try and manage that in the community. So the idea is we're getting away from prescriptive ways of thinking about it and thinking about your system holistically. That's the key thing and how everything's integrated in. And so more adaptive approach to managing. So the next slide, just the key components of what I'm talking about around that is just the basic things that you would think of that are involved in governance. You know, your administration, your finance, including your assets and your asset management, and your infrastructure, and your operations, your watershed, your regulatory liability, and community engagement and relationship. And that last one is probably the key one around managing all of your risks, is getting everybody on side and understanding what's going on, and that's a key one. And then I want to focus just a little bit on the finance and infrastructure piece with asset management. And so with a big lesson of doing the one water system, you have the asset managers and finance people not understanding what the actual asset in the ground is. And so you've got people in their silos talking and they don't really get it. And bringing the people together, so, you know, a finance decision on an asset, sometimes it looks good on paper, this is the cheaper way to go, but it doesn't make sense with what's actually in the ground. And that's a problem with big cities and small communities. So this is the integrated part of how you think about those things. And then the watershed and source protection is critical because it really reduces what you need to do around treatment and understanding what you're dealing with. So
just to give me a second, I was remiss in trying to organize or discuss how we would organize the conversation. And so as we go to the next slide, that'll be a momentary pause. So you could, if we don't get out of hand, you could just speak up and say, I have a question. That might work for now. Let's try that anyway. Tim's comfortable with that.
Yeah, I don't want to be a talking head and everyone's had a presentation, so feel free to ask questions and let's talk about it, and so we can develop some understanding and common ideas here. And so,
So I'm curious, and Tim, forgive me if we talked to you about this one and pulling together, we put together a water system proposal quite a few years ago. It went through the board, we had IHA at the table, we had CBT at the table, and it was the ministry who essentially wasn't engaging on it. But the purpose of that proposal was that the infrastructure planning grants be increase substantially to be able to address exactly what you have on the screen right now, that you would fund this for independent water systems or non-local government owned water systems. I'm curious, were you ever, like, knowing that you have a history with the province, were you a part of that at any time, or do you know if they would be interested in that? If you want to sideline that, it's fine. That's exactly what we were looking funding
Well,
for.
I'll just say, when we were trying to do the one water system, when I was in the Ministry of Health, that was part of the intent, is to actually have a holistic conversation on prioritizing grants and funding and how the ministries can work together and all that, and now I'm sitting here with you, so I was never involved in those conversations, and it didn't mature the way that I thought it could have matured to do exactly what you're talking about, and I think you're talking about Ministry of Municipal Affairs, that they hold first, for the most part, and so, but I agree that that's where this kind of thing should lead.
Okay. Supplemental.
Yeah, for sure. And then Director Graham, you're next, okay? So go ahead.
I will note, some advocacy pieces to circle back on that proposal, and now we have professional backing what we were trying to do, which is essentially ask for IPG to be enhanced. So just a thing that.
Great, thanks. Director Graham?
Thank you, and through the chair to the delegation, thank you for being here. I just have a question. I'm a new director here. So I'm curious, I have read your presentation, but I'm curious about Wildgrass Consulting. Like, are you a for-profit company? Has the Nisukan Improvement District hired you to do this work? Like, or are you a nonprofit and you're working like for being able to get grants? I'm just confused.
So today, right now, here, I'm not being paid by Nisukan, and so, I am for profit. I need to eat and pay my bills like the rest of us, so, I need to do work. But the work that I'm presenting here was a grant from the municipal affairs. But I'm here on my own dime today. The background here was, I wrote a proposal up for Columbia Basin Trust on doing this concept for small water systems. And then, the unofficial feedback I put back, but just is they're looking for more proof in the ground. I approached Tom about potentially trying to get a grant to help move the concept forward with Nisukan. And subsequently, it's led to this presentation. So I'm not being paid today for anything, and trying to just move this forward. I'm quite passionate about water and small water systems, so I would like to get paid, but I have just a sheer interest for many years on trying to do this kind of thing.
Supplemental, if I may?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the grant that Nisukan got for your services, I'm assuming was to the Nisukan Improvement District and not directly to you as a paid contractor?
That's correct. It was the municipal affairs gave Nisukan a grant through RDCK to try and reestablish their governance. And through that process, I was hired to advance a proposal on how to rebuild their community governance.
Okay, thank you. I'm just trying to understand. Thank you.
Perfectly clear. I
Thank you.
should have said that up front.
Thanks very much. Could you put your hand down, Director Graham, just so I don't keep asking you to? Okay, go ahead, please.
Sure. So, and again, feel free to ask questions again. So, just in terms of the governance gap that takes place right now is, right now, there's been a challenge in BC, and this is my perspective on governance and oversight of small systems. And so, sorry.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, so there's been a gap in governance for small systems, and so this work is intended to fill that gap. And that's what I'm talking about now. And so under the Local Government Act or the Water Community Act, There's not guidelines in place on how to actually govern your system. There's stuff on finance, there's different things, but not actually talking about how to govern your water. And then that's a challenge that takes place, and in the Ministry of Health Small Water Systems guidebook, there's also not guidance per se. And so this is the gap that exists now, and that's been known for a long time, and I don't think this is new information necessarily. And so the next slide.
Chair,
Yes, go ahead, Gary.
and I was chatting a little earlier with Tim, because we have chatted in the past over the last decade or more. We have governance gaps in more than our small water systems. I was invited to this baseball season, so I just pinch it to chair a lower Gold River Diking Community Association meeting where they had a governance gap. Dr. Vandenberg helped them most 90% of the way down that path, but simply these small entities trying to do good work as a formally recognized entity by the province don't know how to go about it, involve community and get ahead of the issues, the arguments and the chaos as they're 25 minutes recorded for the AGM that erupts when they don't have a good model. And this model and some of the recommendations here apply to much more than water systems. So I thanked him earlier for that, because a lot of our small
Excellent
systems need
point.
this kind of help.
Thank you. Okay, Tim.
Yeah, so the next slide I'm talking about is the health authority for governance. And so one of the projects that I was involved in for some years and was we had both an onsite sewage UBCM committee, and then we had a small water systems UBCM committee, and those are quite spirited affairs, as some of you may recall. And there was a focus then on governance and how to manage things, and we never landed any solutions out of that. And so some of this work goes to there, and so out of that gap that's happened, health authorities across the province have filled that gap to try and manage the situation, because it's been a challenge. And so that's where we're at now. And this is trying to fill that gap in it, but it's important to recognize what the limitations are in health in terms of their authorities. And so that's the situation that needs to be there. And I think that might be recognized by a number of people now, that this is a challenge. And so, because of that problem, that's maybe perhaps resulted in some of the challenges that are going on around governance is because of this lacuna, so to speak. And well-meaning people trying to get, people have safe water, but that's the situation that we've come in. And so this presentation is really trying to fill this governance gap from the side of what are the authorities of the small water systems themselves. And that's where the focus is. And so I just want to clarify, this is the critical juncture of the presentation of, where that lies. And so I'll move to the next slide. And so the next challenge is also now with the watershed, and this has been something that both large systems and small systems have complained about. And I touched on the challenge with homeowners with the small systems with on-site systems. There's no oversight over on-site systems in the province. And then there's also limited authorities in the watershed to actually manage ongoing risks. And so this is a challenge, and a lot of not only small systems, but large systems, and you hear this with forestry or other industry, they have to treat the water, but they can't manage the risks that are there. And so it results in this kind of a challenge. And so the model I have here hasn't developed all of it, but it does help address the on-site portion of this. And there needs to be, further conversation with respect to the watershed in general. So, this covers part of that gap, but not all of it. And then the other thing that this potentially can help address is climate change issues and water sustainability questions. And so that we talked about that in the Sukin quite a bit. And so some of the things were there. So that's the limitation I'm going to suggest in the challenge is dealing with that watershed broad. So I covered it to the degree I could.
Yeah, Go ahead, Amy.
Yeah, so the province used to identify community watersheds, and that was the form of protection that would be kind of flagged when industry came along with a Crown land tenure. Are you aware if they're still doing those or if that is still not occurring?
Yeah, in fairness, I don't think I'm totally up to date on the recent thing, but I know the community watershed process didn't really mature the way that people might have wanted it to address some of these questions. And you can hear that still around, turbidity issues from logging and, those kinds of issues are still quite alive in the province. And I'm not sure that that's been quite addressed, and I'm not aware of there's been a lot of change in the provincial government around how things are organized, and so I think that would now fall under the new ministry, and I'm not sure where they're at now, and I know the new Water Sustainability Act has created these new watershed provisions, and it still requires going to the province and getting them to do something, and so that's what I'm hinting at in that challenge. So you're right on point with the question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just another note on advocacy piece that, and I know Director Jackson's gonna speak to this, but the water sustainability planning process, which is essentially what the Sustainability Act points you to address watersheds, is an incredibly expensive, cumbersome, long, detailed, doesn't quite get to it for a couple of years process. Whereas simply identifying a community watershed when you have a certain amount of either PODs or a system itself or both should just be the logical step. So I think I'm just gonna note another advocacy piece for us on those community watersheds. Or whatever they would call them. They should be doing that. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Go ahead, Director Jackman.
Yeah, thanks. I believe the province is defaulting more to language along the lines of consumptive watershed. I recall quite a few years ago, one licensee gave a presentation at Boswell and then one at Greendale, a few days apart, because they had various cut blocks along the shore. And at the second presentation, I remember the head of the licensee saying, "Oh, that's the wrong set of slides. This is a community watershed." Greendale was at the time community, our water system drawing, whereas Boswell was different. But I think they're all now considered consumptive because people drink from everywhere.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's a clear metric. I would love to have the province define a consumptive watershed because it used to be an out. Their hydrologists would do less work for the non-community watershed back when I saw it in the side presentations right in front of me. They would disregard certain concerns in one area and then apply, stronger investigations metrics in another. So that is what we need to have defined. What is a consumptive watershed? Which in my mind is pretty well everywhere in the cookies. That's how we're laid out. We got KODs everywhere.
Thank you.
So,
Yeah, onward.
yeah, so that was the general background on what I'm talking about and where I'm coming from. So I'm now gonna just switch and talk a little bit about the project at Nisukin, and I'll outline that, and then I'll stop there, because the presentation slides after that, I provided just to give you some substantive notions of what I'm talking about, but I don't need to drill into all that. So I'll do this next little piece, and then we can hopefully talk.
You have David off with his hand up.
Director Davidoff, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just will email all of you a report on the economics of point of entry versus centralized water treatment that we spent a lot of time working through. And it's a really comprehensive case study of three communities and how this stuff worked, because the POE is something I really thought would solve our problems, but of course there's a whole bunch of other things. So Tim, thank you so much for the report. I did spend a lot of time on it, so I just want to share that information, and then when you get to it, just talk about the economics of POE versus centralized treatment. Thank you.
As a sidebar, Director Davidoff, Tim met with the Glade Watershed Management Team last evening. So he's familiar with one of your systems in your area. Go ahead, Tim.
Sure, with the Nisukan project, and next slide, please. So this was, as I mentioned earlier, a grant to try and address their governance issues, and so, so there had a breakdown in their governance and, with all their trustees resigning over tensions. And over the course of several years, there, a lot of community, tension developed around where to go in the community with their water systems. And so that's how I ended up becoming engaged. It's interesting to note their bylaws are written from 71, and a lot of other bylaws all around are written around that time as well. And if you want to see the change in society, I really recommend you read those old bylaws. So it's, the language will be startling to see the way it's framed from there. And if you haven't, I really strongly assess that. And so, and then the other key thing that was in their situation that probably actually developed a lot of attention around it is their bylaws were not coherent with their water system itself, physically what's in the ground. And so that happens by having people write bylaws that don't know what the system actually is. And so it's really interesting to see that. So it presumes there's private, like they were written for Nelson, and it's actually on a, you know, a one, if you haven't been to Nisukan, it's a one steep road up a hill with houses on it, and the water line runs across private territory, you know, all kinds of things. Assumes a lot of stuff on there. And so this is an underlying tension of what happens when you have, you know, you don't have that integrated approach in how to think about things. So the next slide.
Oh, yeah, please.
I'm sorry, I should have thought of this when you had the kind of table of contents on what you would do with the governance structure. I'm curious, where are you including, or did you talk about asset management?
Yes.
Yes.
So the question of, I had that under finance as a piece of finance, and then I separated it out from the infrastructure piece because the experience that I developed over talking to communities is a lot of them talk about assets as, you know, that's a financial thing and infrastructure is a physical thing, and the people don't know each other.
Right.
Like, I've spent a lot of time in communities, and we would have a community meeting and we'd all be in the room, and then they'd actually be introducing themselves to each other. Yeah, no, I'm over an asset, you know, and oh, I'm the operator. Do you know what those pumps are? No idea. So it was really interesting to see, you know, this happen, and this is what led to the development of the need for this one water concept to really bring people together to understand that. So thanks for asking that question.
Okay, so it's under finance.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Director Jackman.
This might be as good a place as any to interject this, because we have lifted the long ago moratorium on potentially taking on these small independent water systems under the regional districts umbrella. And we've got requirements around assets and asset management, and you have to be properly financed and forward looking. More a question to staff, I guess. We don't really have any requirements that society or improvement district maybe should update their bylaws before coming to us, because that would be a test of the willingness of that community to work under a much more organized structure. Instead of just saying, oh, you had these old bylaws, once you're in the regional district, oh, guess what? We just passed a new bylaw today and that applies. Updating the bylaws within the improvement district as the exercise to test the willingness for them to recognize they lack structure and governance and oversight and all of these things could be a prerequisite for us moving to, because it will take years, I'm sure, for a lot of these systems, moving to regional district systems. It's not part of it right now, is it?
Yeah, through the chair, I don't believe that it is, doesn't pop out as being a requirement. It's certainly something that we, you know, test the waters of, so to speak, when we do have those points of engagement with the trustees, and of course, if we have a public meeting, that'll come up. We do present, you know, the whole pathway to becoming an RDCK service, including all those administrative components, the creation of bylaws, and what have you. But no, I mean, point taken, great point that it does kind of test the temperature of the room on being able to work under that kind of regulatory umbrella.
Yeah, good point.
Okay.
So I'll just talk a little bit about the situation now. So, Masukin didn't have any treatment, so they were ordered by IHA to build a central treatment system. So the challenges that arose immediately was NID has no land to build a treatment plant. So, they have to buy land. And where do you buy land there? So that's a challenge. They don't have any power, so it's a gravity fed system. We require, bring power up and require an entirely new distribution system because it's based on a gravity feed, handling pressures, all that kind of stuff. Putting in chlorine for residual treatment, all that stuff. So they didn't have that, and then they would have to move to having an operator all the time for a small communities. These kinds of challenges, and so they did a bunch of cost assessments, and they also compared the cost of POE, and the community was not willing to go ahead with a central treatment system. And so that's when I entered the picture at that point. And so with this notion of thinking of One Water, like talk to them about their priorities and reviewing their information. And so we came up with these 5 priorities, and I put them forward as a proposal to the community and tested it with them to see, would you have any other priorities? And rather than treatment was actually, they need to get access to water. So they didn't have legal access to their water already. And so, isn't that more important to make sure you have water than treating the water? And, a critical thing. And then they need to meet the treatment objectives that have potable water. And I could consider uranium. So there's uranium seeps on the west slope. And so there's uranium at times. And then had climate change for 2 things: secondary source of water, arguably Kootenai Lake, and then fire protection. And so it's interesting that from a climate change side, it's not thought about, and no fire flows, and it's a big problem. So for thinking about these kinds of questions, and interestingly enough, at the time when I was doing this work, that started off, oh no, we're good, and then the soils caught fire. So it's really interesting how luck sometimes happens, and everyone all of a sudden thinks about climate change as something real. And so, despite having the order in place, I had several conversations with IHA through this project, and they agreed on the 5 priorities. And so it allowed a conversation to move to thinking about what are the risks that we need to deal with, and IHA was willing to engage in that conversation and move forward and accepted the 5 priorities of going forward. So the governance study itself to get there. So I had, did a meeting, and one of the key things that I change slide, please. So the question was, first is asking everybody, trying to get them to appreciate they need to collaborate with one another, because everybody's in disagreement. And so nobody came to the meeting. Like I had a meeting, and people don't want to come. And so how do you talk to people? And I challenged the community about, I can't think of any way out of this situation where you have to collaborate with your neighbors. So can we accept that going forward? And it's really interesting to challenge and also challenge myself on what's there. So this is what I think, help me out here. And so I walked around the community constantly. I stayed in the campground in my camper van and walked around knocking on doors until people were talking. I'd go back and back and back, and until I talked to everybody, and did this 3 times to gradually walk through the concept with a consensus idea based on how to reach consensus. And key to consensus processes, in my mind, is not, oh, I don't agree, so therefore it's not, I'm blocking consensus, but what's wrong with the idea? And can you improve on this idea? So, rather than just blocking, but where are you at on this? And so that was the approach that went, and so from doing that, was able to, move the community through to get agreement on the proposal and developing that kind of content. And I think it's key and wrote up one of the bylaws for them on how to develop consensus for them, because they were in a situation in the past where just trustees make the call and that's the way it works. And so it moves it forward in that regard. And so we were able to get consensus on 22 of 24 homes. And my view as well, just like voting, if you don't participate, then you're going with the democracy. And that's the way I think about it. And so from this, we moved to Interior Health Authority agreeing to entertain a point of entry proposal, which was something, a big change for the community that had not seen that. And so as part of supporting that, I also did a source water protection plan for them and did sampling showing that their water has no E. coli in it. Talked about the source risk upstream, there's nothing there, there's no activity upstream, and so laid all that out for IHA and what a point of entry system would work. And so that got IHA willing to do that, and interestingly enough, I put forward as well the governance, because a lot of people had concerns that this is, the community is gonna govern how this works based on their own bylaws. And after conversation with IHA, and I put their comment in there, they're not gonna comment on the governance, it's not their place. So there was a recognition, and I don't wanna put words in IHA's mouth, but there's a recognition from that of understanding that the authority that they have to actually govern their systems. And there's a lot of detail in there that I'm not going into, but it moved the conversation with the health authority forward quite a bit for the community. And I think even for IHA, and I know all the IHA people quite well, and we get along quite well. So it was good constructive dialogue, would be the way I would describe that.
We have a question, go ahead, Director.
I'm curious about the intersection between the, I'm actually kind of grateful IHA recognize they don't have a role in governance, because it's one less thing to deal with in terms of their involvement. And at the same time, when it comes to POE, great work to get that accepted by them. My past experience with small systems that went to POE, we had Johnson's Landing approved, but that was kind of like a disaster situation. So there was provisions, I think, that were not common for other systems. The other systems I've worked with, when they've looked at a POE, the concern was always the liability around the household management of the treatment opposed to essential treatment, which IHA loves because it means it's got all this extra backup treatment, which reduces liability. My understanding when I encountered this previously was that there was provisions in the bylaws to address that liability at a household level for a POE, and that kind of made it okay for IHA. So any comment? How does that work?
Yeah, so that's a very good question, and that is a key issue. So, and I'm gonna just drill into the weeds a little bit right now, then to answer the question, if that's okay with everybody, and that might result in a lot of other questions. So one of the key things with the governance model that I'm proposing, and I'm talking about, is there's I want to be really clear, there's no moving away from the requirements of the Drinking Water Protection Act. So, and I'm not talking about any lenience on that at all. And so one of the key things is the Drinking Water Protection Act allows point of entry, right? It allows point of entry. It allows a water supplier to distribute non-potable water as long as every home has a point of entry system. Period. So it is allowed. The provision is the water supplier cannot send responsibility for that POE to the homeowner. And so the Drinking Water Protection Act allows multiple owners of a system. So, but just because you're an owner doesn't mean you're the water supplier. And that's what has to be uncoupled. And so the water supplier, like the small system, the trustees or whatever, they're responsible for that, the point of entry system, and how they do responsibility is through the bylaws.
Yeah.
And you can, this works actually for central treatment as well. If you're a central treatment in your small community and you go, yeah, we need a central treatment plant, there's no way we can do this. We're gonna hire a fancy engineering company and they're gonna own the system. And that's fine, they can come in and they own the system and they do all this stuff, you're still the water supplier. And so you're still responsible for meeting everything. You just have somebody else owning that, or somebody could own your distribution line, right? So like, it's flexible in this regard. But it doesn't, just because you have ownership, doesn't mean you're not responsible. And if some of you were around in the past and our good friend Andy Shadrack, some of you may remember, in our small water system committee, he was trying to put forward a proposal which you was quite upset with me. We did not accept that because he was trying to transfer the water supplier responsibility to the homeowner.
Okay.
That was the problem with the model in the past. And so I'm not changing anything of the responsibilities in the act. What I'm talking about is that they maintain that and how do they manage that? They manage that responsibility through their bylaws. And there's sophisticated systems now with intelligence design. You could have, like remotely understanding, oh, it's time to change a light bulb, it's time to change a filter, and you can say, yeah, I'm doing this. Most trustees, they don't know a small system from a large system. They don't need to be able to go in the home. It won't help them anyways, right? So all these things that have been barriers, they don't necessarily need to be barriers. But you just maintain that responsibility, whether it's reports, and the metaphor that I use to talk about this is just think about it as a furnace. You have a point of entry system in your house, and it's a furnace, and you need somebody to come in. You need a gas fitter to come in and do that. You can't just have anybody come and work on your natural gas. It's the same concept. So
just,
Yeah, no, go ahead.
so it's correct in assuming that the POE management is identified through the bylaws.
that's correct.
And so you're not putting it on the homeowner, which is where the liability increases.
Right, and so I'm, and I gave an example on, I think it's, slide 13. If you go forward to slide 13. It says water supplier governance POE bylaws. So just in case we wanted to get in the weeds, so I
Okay.
put forward an example of some of the kind of bylaws you think about. And so, minimum standards for the point of entry system, what are those? What are the reporting requirements to move that's working? And that can even be electronically. So like, I know there's, like, one of the things is administrative capacity for small systems.
Yeah.
So if it's all electronic and it's done and it just does itself, and you're not sitting there, getting all these reports and, oh geez, like, how do I manage that? So there's ways of making this simple so that it's manageable. And so you're not transferring any responsibility. And that's the key stickler for IHA, because that's what the act is.
Yeah.
And so there's nothing in what I'm saying and is saying anything going against the Drinking Water Protection Act or regulation.
What a nerd to say, super cool. I like, that's really exciting. Thank you.
Director Davidoff, Please go
We
ahead.
give John that too.
Thank you,
Oh,
Chair.
sorry, Mary.
I just want to summarize and then ask a question. So my understanding is that you need everyone to sign on, so that's important. The other part is that this POE is this in the home or outside the home? There's also a POU, which is point of use, which is under sinks, which is not recommended. So is this indoor POE? And then in addition to that, is where's the break-even point? Because in the report I emailed out, it's 40 connections. It's cheaper. That's kind of the tipping point. If you got more than 40 point of entry, it's more expensive than central treatment. So I guess I'll just break it down to what type of installation is this after everyone signs on, and then what is the new break-even point?
Okay, so thank you, those are all really good questions, and so just to summarize, the first question is, you know, do you need everyone to sign on? And then point of entry versus point of use, systems, what are those? And then the finance on the break-even point. So on the first point, everyone's signing on, so one thing I want to note, and I've got the slide up already, so ideally what you want is you want everyone in the community to say, we're gonna have a point of entry system, and that's the way we're gonna deal with our water. And so one of the things, the challenge around that is non-compliance. And so somebody's not, that either they say, no way, I'm not gonna do that, and what do you do? Can one person hold up a community of 25 or 100 people? You know, the tyranny of the minority, or what do you do? And so I've got in the bylaws here some actions on non-compliance. So you could potentially issue a boil water notice to the one home that's not signing on. So you've got a boil water notice, you can introduce fines through your bylaws. Okay, if you're not gonna participate, we're gonna fine you for all this stuff because you're not going along with things, or even if you're not changing your light bulbs or managing your system. So those are ways to manage that situation. And so there's in my view, there is nothing in the act that says that boil water notices are not risk management. And so it's just something to think about. How do they encourage people moving on? And so the approach I'm talking about is incrementally managing your risk and moving everybody forward to this place. And so people are started by on and they go forward, and you have two people that are not gonna do it. Okay, well, this is where everybody wants to go, and you just start managing the risk around that. Rather than thinking, how do we get everybody every time on every issue, it's managing incrementally the risk and figure out how to move forward on that with using your bylaws and your governance approach as you can. So that's the first one. The second question is, you can have point of entry or point of use under the Drinking Water Protection Act. So either are viable. So there's and it also then now becomes a question of risk tolerance. And so, I'm not one of those people. Some people like to drink water and have a shower. You got point of use, you can't do that. And so there comes to risk with kids playing, and you turn the hose on outside, and the kids are all playing in the sprinkler, and they turn the hose on, and they can't, and the neighbor's kid drinks your water, and you can't do that, you gotta go into the kitchen and you get water everywhere. So, that's why point of entry makes a lot more sense. Just to have that so that you can function as a community and you don't have to worry about kids drinking water. And I think that's a really critical thing to think about, is how are people going to be using the water and what risks are we managing? And so, and if you're not going to manage the risk, how are you going to manage that risk if you're going to use point of view? So it's a much more challenging proposition, even though it's, a lot more costly. Or less costly to use point of use, sorry. So that's the way I think about that one, and it's a critical one. Now, the question on the finance on the break-even point, and this this came up yesterday, Lee and I were talking about this yesterday as well. And so it's the key thing to think about is what is the starting point? And so a lot of systems now, a lot of people have already put in point of entry systems on their own. And so if you already have assets in the ground, how do you realize that? And so there's some systems that nobody has anything, but a lot of systems in Vesuvian, for example, 10 or 11 people have already spent money putting in pretty good point of entry systems. So it's how do you recognize that asset that's already there? But that needs to be thought about in the cost dynamics around going forward. And if you're building a new community, it may make sense to say, it's cheaper to go central treatment versus this or depending on how you're doing that things. If you're also, what are your other water uses? Because with central treatment, you're potentially treating a large volume of water that is not used for human consumption. And so it's really important to think about all these factors that come into the question around what risk are we managing? And so like for irrigation districts, for example, a lot of it goes for fields. Most people they spend most of their water watering their lawn. Do we really need to treat that volume of water? It's not good for the environment to have chlorinated water going out, killing all the critters in the ground and stuff. So there's a lot of things to be thought about that aren't necessarily factored in when we do these straightforward calculations on what's there. And just a brief even point, I think that question depends on the system. And so, like last night, I looked at a report where with 100 systems, and it was still a third cheaper to go point of entry than central system. So it really depends on the actual particulars that are there. And then other factors like, if you think about Nisukin, they don't have land, the power requirements, you've got the whole issue around, chlorine, do we want to use chlorine? And a lot of people are really, I know Erickson was really concerned about chlorine for a long time. And so these are all the other things, and then now you need an operator in because it's complex, you need that. And one of the things that if you think about the management of the system and the capacity of the people, is you're moving from a system where you have decentralized costs and assets with point of entry and on-site sewage. It's in a home. And so if you have a failure at a home, it's only one small part of the system where and the trustees only have to manage a much smaller budget around what they're talking about. They're no longer moving around managing $10 million, $15 million capital cost kind of concepts. They're actually putting that on, distributing that to the homeowners to manage their budgets around their point of entry and their treatment, or their on-site system. So it's a different cost thing, and so those other costs need to be thought of when we're doing this calculation, rather than just the straight, central treatment versus point of entry. And most of them all the reports I've looked at mainly just look at the cost of the systems themselves and some of the legal costs around that. So I think they're, it's really site specific, but those are the things to think about when you're thinking about this question.
Yes.
So I hope if there is any follow up on that, because I hope I addressed those questions.
So Chair, I have one last question. I promise it's my last question for this session.
Yes, no, go ahead. We're doing great.
Some financial institutions are starting to require certificate of potable water. And this has come up a few times. I know personally we received that. Basically, they said we need a certificate of potable water. Well, in the 100 systems in Area I, you can't get one. You're not going to get a certificate of potable water in Glade and Pass Creek, regardless, even if it's treated. So have you seen this problem? I know the way we dealt with it is that we had to get title insurance and that addressed it. But how has this issue been dealt with in your travels? Have you seen this before? Because I think, and they'll be more stringent. There's going to be more and more of this coming.
Yeah, so that's a really good question, and it's a challenging one, where I have not seen anyone ask for a certificate of potable water myself. The one thing that I thought about that's related to this question is home sales. And there's homes being sold all the time on these systems where they don't have potable water. And like, you're not seeing that being blocked because there's not potable water. And we went down that road exploring that in the past. Why isn't that happening? You know, you have to disclose risks on your system, when you're selling your house. You know, are people disclosing? Yeah, there's no water here. Yeah, we're on an old onsite that was put in 30 years ago. Like, that, it's not happening now, and we've explored that, I mean, probably say like 10, 15 years ago with the realtor. And, it's not something that was catching their eye, and I'm not sure because they recognize and we don't wanna touch that, but it's something that's there, and I haven't seen that happening yet, and so it'll be interesting if that ends up, because that could be a real driver of change if that takes place, and that's where I thought it might come up, but I haven't seen it happen.
With, we could go on, and so not to be, rude or whatever, but we do have to kind of limit it, but these are all questions that are so important to frame this for us as we try and help our small water systems find ways to get more and more potable water over the next 15 and 20 years. Director Cunningham, please go ahead.
I have a statement and then a question, and I'd like your comment on it. In Weimar, of course, we put in a central system, 10, 15 years ago, and the people were really, really opposed to the required chlorination by the Interior Health. So what we did is we gave everybody a charcoal filter for their home. And about 85% of the people in the town took advantage of a free charcoal filter. And then once they got it, they can maintain it. And that took away all the people who were opposed to the chlorine taste in the water. But my question is with regards to the point of entry systems. One of the thoughts was, if we, with the fact that if you have a point of entry system, how do you know that it's being maintained, and how do you maintain it and all the rest of that? I know people put it in and have thought, well, there it is for the rest of my life. And in fact, that's not what it is. And when we talked about this quite some years ago, there was a thought of the district hiring a professional, to go around and change all the filters on a regular rotation, for example, and to ensure that basically that the point of entry system was being maintained as it should. And of course, that would be paid for by the homeowner one way or another through taxes or fees or something like that. But it would basically go a long way to ensuring that the system, that everybody got who's supposed to be getting decent water was getting decent water. I'd like your comments on that idea.
Sure, so those are really good questions. So first of all, I wanna make sure that I'm not giving the impression of an either or. So what I'm talking about works for central treatment or point of entry. And in some cases, you might want accommodation. So for example, you might want at your intake, have a small sand filter to clean the water up to a degree that all of a sudden point of entry now works really well. So everything I'm talking about could be both. And so that's one thing. And so the requirement of chlorination for some is more than just the chlorine, but also the need for an operator to manage the chlorine and that kind of thing. So there's a bit of complexity there. And then on the management of the point of entry systems, this is where under the bylaws, you can have a contract in place that you need, somebody come and maintain it, and you put in your records that it's being maintained, and that's what the water supplier would require. For some communities, it's really easy to take the small water system operator course. And I think it's fairly low bar, and you can have a community say, okay, we're gonna have 3 people take the course, and they can do that. That's something that can get there. So you've got that happening if people need, and some people don't wanna touch their systems, other people are more comfortable. But you can do that kind of thing, and that's exactly the kind of approach that I think, so you're understanding we're on the same page on that entirely.
Thank you,
Great, thanks. So I'm just going to orient us to the time and not trying to shorten it, just so we're all aware. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I should.
Sorry, I just kind of lost track. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
just a comment.
No rush.
Yeah, I was wondering where I met you before, and if you remember, I met with municipal affairs ministers, 3 of them, with Tara being there, and I presume you were there at that time. So anyways, my question is, point of entry. Now, I know the water purveyor is responsible for providing potable water. Some homes will not want a person coming into their home. Can the owner maintain that point of entry system, but provide record to the provider that they have maintained it?
That's right, I think you could do that with your bylaw.
Yeah.
So if you've got the records that show this is what's going on, like it all depends on what you put in your bylaw. And again, it's a question of risk, if you can, like, you're showing your UD, here's my records, the new light bulb, that channel filters. And there's no problem with that, and then as well, where that kind of approach makes it is if you have a remote reporting. Because there's a lot of systems now that you can get that will actually just report in, the bulb has got 90% light, it's down to 50s. And so at the water supplier, that's fine, the homeowner changes their bulb, all of a sudden, oh, it's reporting it's 100% again. So, like there's ways around doing this to accommodate a wide variation of practices to be able to do that. And with different models that get people comfortable to get the assurance in that people are delivering potable water.
Just a follow-up, will the purveyor of water say, this is the standard we want you to use, everybody use this point of entry system? Or can the homeowner decide what point of entry system they use?
But the way that I'm approaching things and talking about it is along the lines of the way the Drink Water Protection Act is written, and it's the outcome. And so it is we need this standard. So everybody asks for an NSF approved system. So for example, you could write that in your bylaw. We need an NSF this, and the real simple thing about the Drink Water Protection Act things, it's 2 forms of treatment. That's what, so UV and a sand filter, usually they go together when you do that. That's your 2 forms of treatment. And so you may have that as your minimum requirement that you've got. And it doesn't matter what brand it is necessarily. And so, but if you're a community and you're gonna be putting in, 25 of these, you might be able to get a really good deal if you're buying 25. But if you're trying to manage the situation of where it exists, some people have them in place. What I'm trying to say is potentially we can try and recover the assets that have already been invested in, and how do we actually move forward to manage the risk that way? And so that's what I'm talking about and what I'm saying. So in that case, you wouldn't make someone go and change it out because we're doing as long as it meets the standard.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Director Jackman, sorry, I've ignored you and,
No. That's okay, yeah, I've had a few chances to speak. So to me, since we jumped to slide 13 of 18, this is the most critical one I think we need to consider if there's action we can take internally on it. So far, our risk management on systems such as Sanka is everyone's on boil water. And doesn't need to be the case. Pretty clearly, I think it's being outlined that you don't have to own the treatment, there are other ways around it. I talked about information bylaws before and community development services, and everyone just stares at me blankly, but when we are not the authority to force or change or create requirements and metrics and laws, all we need is the information. Subdivision bylaw is an example, that's a whole different topic. We just need to record information and we have our definitive action if we don't get that information or it's not satisfactory. So in this case, it's pretty clear in slide 13. You just say, here are the laws that require this information. What are your results? What did you get? Is your bulb still within tolerance? Is this, is that? And if you don't get the information, very definitive single action, individual boil water notice on one house. This is so simple, it hurts. You can do two stages, say, well, I'm gonna find you $100 a week until you give it, but there's probably no point. Because the person who's fallen into default willfully will then just have something to argue about, oh, now you're costing me money. Yeah, spend the $100 and get your system tested, or replace your bulb, you're on boil water. Don't spend the $100, don't come off boil water, stay on boil water, that is your own personal responsibility. In terms of everyone agreeing, for an irrigation district, of course they don't have to. You create new bylaws, 2/3 vote as a special resolution or an extraordinary resolution, and those are the new bylaws, you don't conform, you have an individual boil water notice on your home. I would love to see us think of how this wording could apply to systems like Sanka. Because the other problem with Sanka and our other systems on permanent boil water is we can't add anybody to that line. And this is a workaround for that. That we, within a year or two, simply say, here's a new provision in the bylaw, you will do this. And if you don't, that's fine, you're an individual household boil water notice. And I think that'll make it a lot easier for all the systems that people like Tim are working with to also prepare themselves if they're ever gonna be acceptable to the regional district. This is so simple, it hurts. Stop trying to be the authority. Just require the information required by the authorities, and if you don't get it, you're tagged. That's it. Next.
There's an element of communication that's I'm not saying you can't go there, but there's an element of communication. So anytime you have a homeowner change, we talked already about it, the realtors are not doing that for you. You have to have the ability to inform the new owner about the risk. Typically, by the time we know it, the account is set up or whatever, you have significant time delays till that happens, number one. Number two, we talked about leaving the type of system up to the homeowner. There's certified and non-certified systems. Some of these systems are not always active, meaning you turn your water on, the lamp needs to heat to have initially non-treated water. Or the alternative is they are always on, always consume power and whatever. So there's nuances here where the information about the risk that you are sharing the information flow is critical. So I'm totally for risk managing systems. The problem sometimes is for the entities to be able to ensure that the information flow is there, that every homeowner is fully aware and conscious of the risk that they are sharing.
Fair enough.
So interesting. Yeah, it's Director Watson.
Just a note on the provision of just flagging it, like a non-compliant property. I've noted a lot of issues when it comes to small water systems that might have great bylaws that indicate fines and different things for, trying to keep people up to standards. There is no support for enforcing those fines, and there is no system. Like I know one system has had to call BRCMP several times. They won't respond. They do not respond to these things. So I think it's an important understanding to have that, we have a much stronger authority to enforce fines. We actually have bills that go out and they can do the same, I guess, depending on their status. But I think that the note around just tagging them as on a boil water notice is likely a simpler approach in terms of identifying a system that could be causing liability to others, opposed to like trying to impose it through fines.
Yeah, good point. Okay, quarter two. And we're ticking along. Good questions. I don't see anyone online, so Tim, please go ahead.
Okay, so I didn't really have much more to say, without drilling into another level of weed, which I'm not sure is necessary or wanted. Anyway, so that kind of like covers off the high level points of what I'm trying to cover. So, like I'm trying to, see where people want to go with this concept and what I'm talking about. And, that's why I came out here to inform everyone around that.
All right, I'm going to just quickly say a couple of things. First of all, I'd like to thank the executive committee, of which two people are here, that delegated this possibility to the Water Services Committee. So, through the poor, because Uli was acting at the time, I believe, at that executive committee meeting. Acting up. So thanks for, creating this venue for this conversation. And Tim, thanks very much. I'm not ending it. I'm just making sure I say a couple of things. So thanks very, very much for this information. And as sometimes, there's possibilities. I've been on my water system for 36 years. I've been at this table for 12 years, and there's been no movement toward potability other than that's internally driven by a water system. So we've got nice new pipes and nice new shut-off valves, and we've break our sand filter and this, that, and the other thing, but that's internal to our system. And to get to potable water for 60 units up off of Hamel Creek is insurmountable, it seemed, and to meet the guidelines. And so you've brought forward to my eyes anyway, possibility of working toward a 20-year goal as opposed to zero happening in the 12 years I've been here, that a lot of people will be motivated to and inspired to do something to create potability in their house. So I really wanted to say that, and Tim and I are going to talk more, and I'm going to reach out to the directors around this table, the rural directors. Once we define exactly what, and your conversation with Columbia Basin Trust, further conversation, exactly what the scope would be of what Tim would like to bring back to us as an opportunity. And we could use, because of his background, Nasukan as a model, a template for other systems that would then require not that much tweaking, hopefully, or at least provide enough of a model for managers to be able to adapt it for their system. So I'll be reaching out to directors after talking to staff and Tim with the specifics of funding something that will be a concrete thing that we can perhaps use. So that's my summary of things so far, and now I'll just turn it back to others that may want, as we get close to the closing time, to make a comment. I did want to particularly, not to put you on the spot, Director Popoff, but you have been doing so much about, the community of water systems and improvement districts and your conversations with the ministry over many, many years. Is there any closing comments you'd like to make?
Well, a comment, good presentation. Tim, and I do remember you, Tara, and I've met with the ministers there, and that was basically improvement districts have let their systems degrade to a point where to bring them up to standards, our standards here is a $3 million effort for, let's say, 70 water users. Completely financially impossible. Point of entry is a possible solution, but we have to get buy-in. Now, I'm facing an improvement district that's probably gonna have their AGM in May, and all the trustees are gonna resign because they've given up. So a governance issue. So there would be some support that I would support something like that, having them work with us, directors that have problems in their own specific areas. And, financially, we have grant money that's available for us, and I'd be quite comfortable with that if you spearhead that.
Okay. Yeah. Well, it sounds like we are coming to a closure. Tim, thanks again so much for taking this on and reaching out to me and to staff, our water services staff, saying, hey, let's talk to Tim. We had a nice meeting yesterday, as I said, pre-meeting to this. So I think we can leave it at that. Any closing comments, Tim?
No, I'm just very grateful for the time and, you know, thanks for having me here to speak with everyone and good to see some people again. Very good to see you again. Yeah.
Well done.
Great. Okay, well, I'm going to move a motion to adjourn the meeting. It's moved and seconded. And all in favor? Okay, we're adjourned and now there might be some light conversation and then we'll mute things pretty soon and say goodbye to everyone online. Thanks very much, everyone.
Recording
and,
stopped.